$195,000 a year, with no college degree and no student debt. 99 out of every 100 people who apply for the apprenticeship are turned away. Some locals take several thousand applications for a few dozen slots. That is what a senior elevator adjuster earns in a major metropolitan local, and the ladder up to him sits behind the hardest door in American construction. Most people think an elevator mechanic is a repair technician who fixes lifts when they break. That undersells it badly. A modern elevator is a hoisting machine, a safety system, and a networked computer running dispatch logic across dozens of cars, all inside a shaft where a mistake is fatal. You are simultaneously a rigger, an electrician, a hydraulics tech, and a software troubleshooter. That is why the pay sits at the top of the trades, and it is also why the union restricts entry so tightly. The trade protects its wage by controlling how many people are allowed to learn it. Let's start at the bottom. The helper earns $19 to $22 an hour, about $41,000 a year, though many locals do not use this rung at all and go straight to apprentice. You carry U-Haul guide rail, which arrives in 16-foot steel lengths and weighs more than you expect. You carry counterweight blocks, sheaves, and cable into a shaft with no lighting except what you brought. You clean the pit, which is the space below the lowest floor where water, rats, and 30 years of dropped hardware collect. You hold things and hand things and stay out of the way. Getting in requires a high school diploma and a body that can do it, and in some locals a connection that gets your name in front of the right person. Turnover here is high, near 40% in the first year, and the reason is almost always the shaft. A meaningful number of people discover they cannot work in a dark vertical space with a drop below them. The thing nobody tells you is that this rung is often used as a proving ground before an apprenticeship slot is offered. Helpers who show up and keep their mouth shut get sponsored. That sponsorship is worth more than any test score. There is a detail about the application itself that catches almost everyone. When a local opens its apprenticeship window, it may stay open for a few days, once every 2 or 3 years, and it is announced through the local rather than through any job board. People who get in are usually people who are already watching for it, and that means knowing which local covers your area and checking directly. The single most common reason a qualified applicant never gets in is that they did not know the window had opened. If you are serious about this trade, find your local now and ask when the next intake is expected, years before you plan to apply. The apprentice earns 50 to 70% of mechanic scale, starting near $28 an hour and finishing near $48, so roughly $58,200, rising to $99,800. Now you learn the trade properly. You run rail and plummet true, because a shaft that is out of alignment by a fraction of an inch produces a ride passengers can feel. You wire controllers, terminate hundreds of connections, and learn to read a wiring diagram that covers an entire wall. You install door operators, which cause more service calls than anything else in the system. You learn lockout procedures until they are reflex, because the machine you are working on can be started remotely by someone who does not know you are in the shaft. Getting in means passing the aptitude exam, clearing the interview, and being selected. The exam is mostly mechanical reasoning and arithmetic, and it is not the hard part. The hard part is that applications outnumber slots by 100 to 1 in strong locals. Apprenticeship runs 4 to 5 years with documented field hours plus classroom work. Around 15 to 20% do not complete it, which is low. And the reason it is low is that the selection already removed everyone marginal. The thing nobody tells you is that once you are accepted, the union has enormous incentive to see you finish. They turned away 100 people to pick you. It is worth explaining why the union restricts entry the way it does, because from outside it looks like gatekeeping, and from inside it looks like arithmetic. The number of elevators in a city grows slowly. Each one needs a fixed amount of maintenance labor per year. If the union trains more mechanics than that installed base can support, wages fall for everyone already in it. So the apprenticeship count is set against projected work rather than against demand from applicants. And in a slow construction year, the intake shrinks. This is the single mechanism that keeps this trade paying what it pays. It also means that getting in has as much to do with what year you applied as with how good your application was. The elevator mechanic earns $52 to $66 an hour, roughly $108,000 to $137,000 a year before overtime. Total compensation including benefits runs considerably higher because the health and pension package in this trade is among the strongest in construction. You install new elevators from an empty concrete shaft. You set the machine, run the rails, hang the car, reeve the ropes, and commission the system. You work from drawings, and you are responsible for a finished installation passing state inspection. Getting here means completing the apprenticeship and passing the mechanic examination, which in many states is a licensed credential. Attrition is very low, under 5%, and the trade has among the highest retention rates in construction, because leaving means giving up a wage almost nothing else matches. The thing nobody tells you is that new installation work is cyclical and follows construction. In a downturn, installation mechanics get laid off, while service mechanics keep working. Which side of the trade you are on determines whether a recession touches you. There is a piece of this job that gets described in one sentence and deserves more. The entrapment call is the defining experience of elevator service work. You arrive to find people who have been in a stopped car for 40 minutes, and the range of how they are handling it is enormous. Some are calm, some are not. And someone who is not calm inside a stopped elevator is a genuinely difficult situation to manage, while you are also solving a mechanical problem. The trade teaches a specific protocol. You talk to them continuously through the door. You tell them what you are doing before you do it, and you never move the car until you know where it is and that the doors are secure. Mechanics say the technical part is usually simple. The part that stays with you is the voice on the other side of the door. The service mechanic earns $58 to $72 an hour, about $120,000 to $149,000 a year, and with on-call rotation most clear $160,000. You maintain a route of buildings rather than installing new equipment. You do scheduled maintenance, you answer trouble calls, and you carry the phone. When someone is trapped between floors at 2 in the morning, you are the person who drives there and gets them out. Getting here means mechanic status plus route assignment, and it usually favors people with strong troubleshooting instincts over strong installation hands. There is no washout rate, but there is burnout from on-call. The thing nobody tells you is that on-call pay is where the income actually separates. Two service mechanics on the same scale can be $35,000 apart at year-end, purely on how many rotations they take. Before the specialist rungs, something about safety that defines how this trade works day to day. An elevator shaft is one of the few workplaces where the equipment you are servicing can kill you by being switched on normally. Not by failing, by working. A car moving at normal speed with a mechanic on top of it is a fatality if that mechanic is not where they should be. So the trade runs on lockout procedure with an absoluteness that surprises people from other trades. You physically disable the machine, you tag it, and you keep the key on your person. Nobody else can restore it. Mechanics who cut corners on this do not get warned twice, and the trade's fatality rate is low precisely because the procedure is treated as non-negotiable rather than as paperwork. The adjuster earns $70 to $88 an hour, roughly $145,000 to $183,000 a year, and senior adjusters in major markets exceed that with overtime. This is the most specialized rung in the trade. You tune the elevator, which means you set acceleration curves, leveling accuracy, door timing, and dispatch behavior so the ride feels right and the system moves the building's traffic efficiently. You work with the controller software, run diagnostics, and chase intermittent faults that appear once a week for 4 seconds. A building with poor lobby flow at 8 in the morning is an adjusting problem, not a hardware problem. Getting here takes years as a mechanic plus manufacturer-specific training, because every major elevator maker uses different control architecture. There is no formal test, only reputation. Very few mechanics become adjusters because it requires a mind that enjoys chasing invisible problems. The thing nobody tells you is that adjusters are scarce enough that companies fly them between cities. A good adjuster is one of the few tradespeople who gets recruited by name. Something about the technology in this trade that outsiders find surprising. A modern elevator group is a real-time control problem. 6 cars, 40 floors, and a morning rush produce a scheduling question with an enormous number of possible answers, and the controller solves it continuously, deciding which car answers which call based on position, direction, load, and predicted demand. The algorithms are proprietary and genuinely sophisticated. When a building complains that the elevators are slow, the cars are usually not slow at all. The dispatch logic is answering calls in an order that feels wrong to a person standing in the lobby. Diagnosing that is closer to software work than to mechanical work, and it is why the top of this trade increasingly belongs to people who are comfortable with both. The modernization specialist earns $80 to $94 an hour, $166,000 to $195,000 a year, including overtime and premium work. You replace the guts of existing elevators in occupied buildings. A 50-year-old bank of 6 cars in a working office tower has to be brought to current code and current control technology while the building keeps operating, which means you take cars out of service one at a time, and the tenants notice every day of it. You work with original drawings that are wrong, equipment that is discontinued, and a shaft that does not match anything documented. You interface with building engineers, inspectors, and property managers who want to know why it is taking so long. Getting here requires mechanic and usually adjuster experience, plus a tolerance for ambiguity that a lot of excellent installers do not have. The thing nobody tells you is that modernization is the growth side of the trade. The installed base of aging elevators in American cities is enormous, and code updates force upgrades on a schedule. This rung is the most secure work in the entire trade. One more thing that shapes an entire career in this trade, and it is decided in your first 2 years. Elevator work splits into construction and service, and the two sides develop different people. Construction mechanics install new equipment, work from drawings, and follow the building cycle. Service mechanics maintain a route, troubleshoot, and carry the phone. Construction pays slightly better in a boom and disappears in a downturn. Service pays steadily and never stops, because buildings need their elevators working in a recession too. Mechanics generally pick a side early and stay, because the skills diverge. A construction mechanic with 15 years can install anything and may be genuinely weak at diagnosing an intermittent fault. If you enter this trade, understand that the choice is real and that it is easier to move from construction to service than the other direction. There is a path outside the ladder worth naming. Elevator inspectors, licensed by state, earn $95,000 to $150,000 and work daytime hours with no shaft climbing and no on-call phone. Consultants who specialize in elevator traffic analysis and modernization planning for large property owners bill $150 to $250 an hour. Both are where the trade goes when the knees and shoulders have had enough, and both require the field years first. There is no shortcut into either. One last thing about where this trade is going, because it affects anyone entering now. The installed base of elevators in American cities is old. A large share of equipment in commercial buildings was installed in the 1970s and 80s, and it is reaching the point where modernization is not optional. At the same time, accessibility code and fire service requirements have tightened, which forces upgrades on equipment that would otherwise be left alone. That produces a decade or more of guaranteed work that cannot be offshored, cannot be automated, and cannot be deferred indefinitely by a building owner. Very few trades can say all three of those things. It is the strongest structural argument for this career, and it is the reason the wage has held while other trades softened. Helper, $41,000. Apprentice, $58,200, rising to $99,800. Mechanic, $137,000. Service mechanic, $160,000 with on-call. Adjuster, $183,000. Modernization specialist, $195,000. 15 to 20% of apprentices do not finish, but that number is misleading, because the real filter happens before you start. In a strong local, roughly 1 applicant in 100 is accepted. The trade pays this well specifically because almost nobody is allowed in. Next, every level of a crane operator.